Hello and namaste. This is Vinay here with this new episode of NBP Hot Seat. Today we have with us Dr. Sitakan Mishra, who is Associate Professor at Pandit Deendayal Energy University, PDEU, Gandhinagar, Gujarat. He was also the member of the task force on India's energy security in a carbon constrained world, constituted by Vivekananda International Foundation, New Delhi. Our topic of discussion with Dr. Mishra is India's energy transition and mainstreaming of nuclear in the energy mix. Dr. Mishra, it's a pleasure to have you on this show. We welcome you and excited to hear your thoughts on the topic.
Thank you very much, Vinay. It's my privilege and really I'm so happy to be part of this discussion. I thank you and also the Nuclear Business Platform for having me in this platform and discuss some of the imperatives of nuclear energy and India's energy transition. The
Thank you so
topic
much.
has been the topic has been actually followed by me since many decades, in fact. And as an academician and a research scholar in this domain, I have great interest in the topic, and I'm closely observing this topic over the last one decade, particularly. And the energy transition, when we talk about, we can't just really, seclude this topic from India or India, in that matter, from the rest of the world debate revolving around the energy transition and the climate change issues. And of course, to my mind, I think we're in a very, very difficult time. And also, as well as we are in a very interesting time
Yeah,
because the options for energy security are very less.
yeah.
And then there is a pressing concern world over how to manage the development trajectory as well as meet the climate change goals. And
Yeah,
in
so
these
so
kind
so
of
here
push
so
and
so
pull
here yeah,
factors,
so here I
India
would
is
like
very
to
much caught up with this debate.
Yeah, I would like to draw your attention that as far as the world is concerned, but particularly Europe and America, now they are already developed. So India is basically has committed, for meeting carbon emission obligations, right? When its economy is developing also, right? So India has to kind of develop and decarbonize at the same time. So can you sort of throw some light on different dimensions and the underlying challenges for industries and economy to basically make both of these objectives successful, and
Absolutely.
how they would pursue their path, particularly in the case of India. Over to you, Dr.
Yes.
Mishra.
Uh, India has always been actually in the forefront of global energy transition debate, climate change debate, and so also over the last one decade, more particularly. And India has never shied away to debate on these issues in the international platform. And we have seen in the all the climate change negotiations, India has positioned itself in the front row and debated about the energy issues and climate change. So India never shied away to debate all these issues, number one. Number two, at the same time, India has a biggest compulsion being the one of the largest populated country in the world. And we have a sizable population below the poverty line, and the government has the owners to take them upward in the economic
Yes.
trajectory. And therefore, to to meet the developmental goals, India has a bad need of increased energy production, which will ultimately definitely add to the carbon emission. But that's a compulsion India cannot really overlook. It is a compulsion for India. But at the same time, India has, in the last few COPs, particularly COP
Yes.
26, 27, India has, laid down its policy as a responsible partner of the Global Committee of Nations, how to meet the global climate change challenges. Particularly in the Glasgow, India has set its goal that by 2070, India will meet the net zero emission goal. Yes, of course, it is little longer than any other country in the world,
Yeah.
but we have the largest compulsion as well. But realistically, if you look at in the same timeline, within the same timeline, India has also fixed its goal to generate a capacity of 500 gigawatt by 2030, and at the same time meet 50% of its energy requirements from renewable energy by 2030, which
Correct.
India is almost at the verge of committing this goal. So in a very fantastic way, India is managing its energy transition, but at the
Yeah.
same time, the world must notice India's compulsions.
Yes.
Because as a populated country in the world and its aspiration to become a developed country in the world, therefore India has a lot more compulsions as well at the same time responsibility. So
So
keeping
as a
these in mind,
yeah. So as a result of these initiatives which are taken by Government of India, these policy initiatives, we see that recently there have been a good amount of growth in the renewable sector, and particularly in solar, we see that a good amount of capacity addition is happening in the country, and it's very encouraging, for India to see a cleaner world. But for their intermittency and variability issues, the massive energy system, particularly the grid, is required to be supported by some reliable and cost-effective clean energy source, which comes as a base load capacity for the grid. So there are several ways to do that. And if we see that we are able to basically resolve the issues of reliability and affordability and sustainability, so I think such options could also be thought of. So what is your take on that?
so India is very fortunate to be located in a part of the world where we get a lot of free solar energy.
Yeah.
And we are fortunate to be in this part of the world. So obviously, India has an advantage over all other countries to fetch the renewable energy, particularly the solar energy. And realizing the climate change, issues, India has from the very beginning tried to, fetch as much solar energy as possible. And you find the upsurge of, production of solar energy in India over the last 1 decade at least. But the point is to achieve a sizable economic growth, what we are projecting almost to achieve 5 trillion economy and then maybe 8 trillion economy in the subsequent decades, you need to at least increase your energy production up to threefold up to 2070. And that's what the
Yes.
goal actually. You need to produce 3 times of energy production at this current level to achieve the desired economic growth. And the renewables are definitely a good source of energy, and we are fortunate to have that. But the question is whether they are sufficient to cater to the demand of economic development. As you rightly mentioned, that the renewable energy are having a lot of challenges and particularly some loopholes in the sense that they're intermittent and they cannot really help us to run heavy industries that is called the base load factor. Solar energy is good to fetch for domestic purposes, some other low intensive industrial sector we can use it, but when it comes to heavy industry, and that is what is the imperative for achieving the economic growth, the desired that we are achieving looking for, you need a base load power production. And in that sense, the options for base load power production are very less. We have, of course, hydroelectricity, which we are planning to expand at the same time. And that's the reason why we are almost relying on the fossil fuel induced energy production.
Yeah.
Coal, still we are relying heavily.
Correct.
And even the thermal power that is we know, and that is the major contribution of the greenhouse gas emissions and the carbons.
Yeah.
So the options for baseload energy productions are very less. And in that context, if you look at what options India has, except the thermal and the hydroelectricity, and that comes the nuclear energy.
Yeah.
And in that sense, India is very fortunate to have a sizable nuclear energy infrastructure over the last 6-7 decades across the country. And nuclear technology and its productions are used in numerous other sectors of Indian economic activities. So we are very fortunate to have a sizable nuclear infrastructure as well as the renewable energy. So if you have a balanced mix of energy mix that contributes to the nuclear as well as renewable, I think that's the best way that India can plan for. And probably it seems that there is a realization in the country that nuclear energy is, of course, a viable option today in India, and looking at the infrastructure that is available in the country. So only the willpower, political will, and also a good planning will definitely help India to achieve the desired energy production at the same time meeting the climate change goals.
You are right, and nuclear can be a force multiplier in that sense, and probably could be the best thing to be mainstream in an adequately diversified energy mix of the country. Of course, India is building some of the good number of nuclear power plants, but looking at the massive requirement of the country, right? Uh, if we extrapolate it to 2050 and 2000, beyond that 2070, they look to these, the whatever capacity addition we have for nuclear, it looks to be peanut. So what do you think, how are different stakeholders in the policy side are looking at it and planning to go ahead? Dr. Mishra.
That's really an important issue, in fact, Vinay. Right now, we have 23 nuclear reactors running. That produces almost 7,480 megawatt plus minus. And also there are 9 other nuclear reactors are under construction, which will add another 8,000 megawatt. So, by the completion of these reactors, I think India will have comfortably around 15,000 megawatt electricity generation from the nuclear source. And also there are a few others are planned. So 12 are approved and 18 are other plans. So by 2030, if we put it in very conservative way, I think India will have around 22,000 megawatt energy production for electricity. And that is very, safe to assume that is going to succeed. But that is not going to really cater to energy demand of India in the longer run. As I told little before, by 2070, India needs to, upgrade its energy production almost 3 times to really achieve the desired economic growth. For that matter, if you're thinking that nuclear is a viable source, I think expedition of nuclear energy project is very much essential. It is warranted, and government, it seems right now, is very aware of this process. But there are, of course, some bottlenecks. We can't think. The question arises why India's nuclear projects are not succeeded to produce the desired electricity production. Now, the point I was trying to tell you is, yes, we have very sizable nuclear infrastructure.
Yeah.
And by 2030, we can assume that India will produce almost around 20,000 megawatt energy from electricity from nuclear sector. And if we see little future, and those are the reactors that are planned, if we expedite them, definitely India will be able to fetch a sizable energy from the nuclear sector. But of course, there are a lot of questions about nuclear energy sector in India. Over the last 6-7 decades, the projection that the energy sector has made never been achieved. And there are a lot of reasons for it, valid reasons, in fact. The multilateral, export control regimes were very harsh on India over the last few decades. And that's one of the reasons why India could not really produce desired, nuclear energy, even if it has projected in that sense. There are many other reasons, and one other reason is also the domestic factor. There are a lot more opposition and hurdles in the domestic level, and we have seen how the Kudankulam reactor was hostage for several years. And there are many such, public protests happening within the country. So over the last few decades, India has been settled within as well as outside because of the multilateral non-proliferation regimes. Now, after the India-US nuclear deal, the world is welcoming India. But at the same time, the domestic level, we find the problems are still intact. So at the domestic level, India's nuclear program seems to be settled within. That is where the major concern is. Can we really address this issue in a concerted manner? The Kudankulam issue that happened a few years ago, where the public was vehemently protesting, and the nuclear establishment in India actually realized and learned its lesson. And since then, you find a lot more enthusiastic participation of the establishment as well as the public outside. So today, when we assess India's nuclear energy debate within, it is very rightly now entangled with the climate change issue, which is a good one. Now, people are realizing that if we have to meet the climate change goals as a responsible member of the Committee of Nations, then we need to explore all other options of energy sources. And nuclear is definitely a viable source. So what I find a positive attitude within the domestic level that nuclear can be a viable source to help India achieve its net zero emission goal. So with this positive, trend, I would rather suggest that the establishment need to go further. The nuclear establishment is doing really wonder. And if you look at the government policy over the last few years, particularly 2015 onwards, the government has opened up the nuclear industry sector for more participation of the other government agencies. The Atomic Energy Act of 1962 has been amended in 2015. And then 16 onwards, we are welcoming now new players into the nuclear energy sector, particularly the NTPC, Nuclear Thermal
Yeah.
Power, National Thermal Power Corporation of India, Indian Oil, Indian Railways, all these can be the new players in the energy sector, which will open up the energy sector for more nuclear players. That's a capacity building that India is rightly doing. The second part, I think the plan is is bringing new technology to this sector, and particularly what India is eyeing for the small modular
Yeah.
reactors, which are the promise of the future. And it has a lot more potential in India because in a populated center, you can easily host it. It's a smaller one, much more safe and secure, and it can cater to India's energy needs in the remote places. So that
Correct.
is another policy intervention that the government has undertaken, and I'm sure it will go in a big way. So, rightly, the government has undertaken these initiatives, and the private sector is equally important in India now to participate in the supply chain of nuclear energy sector. So
Yes.
these are positive things that have happened, but at the same time, the public is still a little bit concerned,
Yeah.
and rightly so, because it's the public money that is spent, and the public has the authority to question. Now, how quickly the establishment and the concerned citizen can address the public concerns, that matters the most.
So
Over to you.
what is your assessment on acceptability of nuclear as a clean energy and reliable source, and what sort of critical factors you sort of assess, at different levels and of underlying causative issues, so that these issues can be perception issues can be addressed, and sort of try to build a perception from which is currently negatively dominated, to supportive and then proactively supportive, kind of we can
Yes,
basically work and make it proactively supportive. So how do you
yes.
what do you propose to
Right.
go ahead with it?
I, for one, who really have great faith on nuclear energy. I personally believe that nuclear energy is the way forward for India. Now, keeping my personal observation apart, I have a very interesting observation on India and India's public perception on nuclear. A lot of people say there are a lot of anti-nuclear movement in India, but actually it is not. I won't put this opposition as anti-nuclear the way it is happening in Europe and other places. It is rather in India, it's an opposition or rather a questioning of the government initiative. It's not an ideological basis that
Okay.
the opposition is happening in India. It is just a public concern
Okay.
about the projects. So every project, every scientific project, industrial project has its loopholes, and so also nuclear. So people are concerned about this. It is
Correct.
not an ideological opposition, unlike the European, green movement that is happening in different other parts of the world.
Correct. Correct. Correct.
Here, so from my point of view, I may be wrong in this. We don't have anti-nuclear movement in India yet, and that's a
Okay.
very positive thing. What I find. Yes, there are opposition, vehement opposition we have seen in the recent past in the Kudankulam area, but that is very nicely sorted out. I would rather call that the establishment lot used relations, and the public also realized later on that yes, the government, the concerned agencies are very, very particular to address the public concern. Ever since the Kudankulam, you see a lot of activities that the nuclear establishments are undertaken under the mandate of the CSR activities, reaching out the community proactively, engaging the people, and they have planned a massive, education process to educate the people, the society at the popular level, the education institution, the school childrens, taking up some popular, undertakings at the community level. So in a massive way, the establishment is now reaching out proactively to the people, addressing their concerns, which is really a wonderful and praiseworthy thing. But yes, a lot more has to be done. The nuclear is definitely invisible, the radiation is invisible, a lot of questions in the mind. It's a technology intensive sector. Therefore, sometimes it is not comprehensible for the common man. Now, here comes the role of the concerned citizens. No, nuclear seems to be taken as a kind of technology intensive project, which is actually not.
Yeah.
Nuclear is a beautiful thing. It is used in many other sectors that the population doesn't know. How many people getting cured by the nuclear technology in the medical sector, people don't know. How many cancer patients are really getting a
Yes.
second life because of the nuclear technology, people don't know. How many, how it is helping the agriculture sector, our yield production has increased,
Yes.
people don't know. How many
Yes.
people are actually getting benefit out of the nuclear projects, how their life building up life assets in the around the nuclear projects, people don't know. Here lies the role of the concerned citizen, I would rather say, and I often has propagated this an idea of called the nuclear cheerleaders. The scientists are, of course, the best cheerleaders, no doubt about it. But as I told, the nuclear is a little bit technology intensive. The scientists often tend to explain things in scientific terms which may not be comprehensible by the common man. So here comes the role of the social scientist like me, who has a great interest and also a propagator. So can I be accommodated by the nuclear industry or the establishment to get educated myself and also go to the community, propagate them, tell them, clarify them from my common man point of view so that it will be much more appealing. And therefore, I sell one idea that is called the nuclear cheerleaders that the establishment need to now produce, inviting the social scientist,
Yes.
inviting the women participation, because the nuclear industry seems to be a little bit masculine in sense, and the energy sector is actually directly affecting the women
Yeah.
of the society. Now, the women should have a better say, bigger say in the nuclear industry, I personally feel. Yes,
Yes.
the nuclear industry has a nuclear learning mechanism, they have a nuclear education mechanism dealing with the education sector, the public, the media. They do it in a much better way now, which is good. But at the same time, I think we need to think out of the box. Can
Correct.
we
Correct.
invite non-scientific community, social scientists to this education process and build up confidence among the public? That's my suggestion would be. Thank you.
That's wonderful. So you mean to say that if there are adequate communication strategies and management plan in place, right? So I mean, this public perception issue can be resolved to a great extent. And then as a sort of a specific example, that we can go with s- and basically try this strategy is to work around some nuclear cheerleaders, right? Who may not be the part of the DAE or nuclear establishment in the country, but they can kind of be some external uh, cheerleaders or external influencer who can basically champion the cause of nuclear. And we see that Grace Stank in Miss America, she's really doing great stuff in America, and she's a graduate Miss Universe America and she Miss
Exactly.
America, and then nuclear engineering graduate, and she's really creating positive vibe in the US and other part of the world. So really, that's a very good
Look at the
example.
cricket
And
sector. Look at the cricket sector. Cricket.
yes,
Uh,
yes,
they would be the first example in our imagination we know. The
yes,
cheerleaders in cricket.
yes,
They
yes.
don't play the cricket. They have
That's
nothing to do with the cricket, but they
correct,
jump
correct.
for each score. Anything that
Absolutely,
happens, they cheer the leader, cheer the cricketers
absolutely,
and the crowd. And that
absolutely.
I think the nuclear industry needs to learn lessons from the cricket industry. And
Yes.
there are enough educated people in the country, those who
Mm.
are really love nuclear, they know what is happening, they're aware of the vested interest working in the nuclear sector, and they can be tapped for better management of the nuclear
Absolutely,
information management system that the nuclear
absolutely.
industry has utilized over the last few decades.
Have got social media in place now, so a lot of stuff can be done on this at this front, and then perhaps we can surely have some positive result, and perception can be sort of changed from this change to a proactively to a level where people are not only supportive but proactively supportive for the nuclear cause. So, with this, Dr. Mishra, we would like to wind up. So, if you have, before we wrap up, if you have any final word for the audience, you may please elaborate on that.
Um, Absolutely. I mean, I'm a great cheerleader of nuclear. I would be very happy to, propagate what I do actually, in fact, and I encourage the young generation, particularly the women, the females, scholars, to take the call. It is they who actually should be the nuclear cheerleaders, and any social scientist for that matter. We need to, keep in mind that nuclear technology is safe, secure, and abundant to meet the global energy demand of the entire humankind, in fact. So, only thing is, we need to understand that it is nuclear which not failed us. It is we who failed the nuclear, and
Absolutely.
therefore, I think we need to go for a mid-course correction. The entire humanity, entire public should really have a second thought that how interesting and important the nuclear technology is. So, nuclear energy should be looked at in totality, its contribution to the entire humankind, and then locate the nuclear energy within that context. Then we will get a better answer and better view of nuclear energy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Mishra, for this enriching discussion. It's really wonderful to have your insight on the subject. And viewers, with this, we are winding up. For any question or queries,
It's a
please
pleasure.
drop in your message in the comment section below. We will get back to you at the soonest possible. Also, stay tuned for the upcoming fifth edition of the annual India Nuclear Conference, INBP 2024, which is based on the theme of new nuclear and energy transition and scheduled for 19th and 20th November later this year in Mumbai, Maharashtra. With this, we are winding up,
Look forward.
signing off, and we are signing off. Bye bye. Thank you. Bye.